Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Tibet, a country that got lost, and the country that was occupied by China. And in today's day and age, that seems very impossible, but that is the reality. Today, I have someone really special for me to present to you the story of what's happening inside Tibet, and of course, a lot of the angles from China, and of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I have with me Mr. Tenzin Lekshay, who is the spokesperson and the additional secretary, Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamsala. Sir, thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to have you on my channel to hear the story of Tibet and, of course, to know what's the story inside, how are the people, and to know a little more about this very mysterious country that we have only read about.
Thank you, Aadi. Thank you for inviting me for the interview, and in fact, I'm privileged to speak about what's happening in Tibet and in India, especially in India, because since we have a age-old relationship, really special bond between the Tibetans and the Indians. And we could also say that it's a civilization relationship somehow between the Indians and the Tibetans, because we live side by side as a neighbor for centuries, for millennia. And there's a cross sections of interactions, exchange, knowledge being taught beyond Himalayas, and that's what we call the Tibetan Buddhism. Right. And that's what we call this Tibetan Buddhism is a Nalanda tradition, right, which is the Indian tradition. And we, as a Tibetan, have kept that tradition alive, thriving upon it since from the 7th centuries. Right. And therefore, it is not just the Buddha Dharma, even the Tibetan language. The Buddhist scriptures which were written in the Tibetan language, which has also been introduced through the Devanagari scripts, which is the Indian scripts since 7th century. So therefore, there is a cross sections of interactions, cross sections of engagements all through the ages. But somehow, in 1950s, in 1949, when Chinese Communist regime came into power, and Mao himself talked about these 5 fingers and a palm, and they have started occupying Tibet, invading Tibet, from the eastern part, militarily, forcefully, and then it took them almost 9 years, 10 years to fully occupy Tibet. And only in 1959, they came to Lhasa and then occupied Tibet. It's occupation. Though China at this point in time were talking about liberation. But now the question is, they're being very insistent about liberation. Every year they celebrate this liberation, so-called the liberations. Now, many people do not understand Tibet. Tibet is a hidden land. Tibet is a landlocked country. Many people do not even understand what is Tibet means. Right? So therefore, many people are confused when China occupied Tibet. Many people do not understand or know anything. So China took advantage of that. China took advantage of the world being decolonized. When people are in the world in 1950s, when people are so focused on decolonizations, with the emergence of new countries in 1950s, China took advantage by putting their own militaries into Tibet and then occupied Tibet. And not much of the people knows about it. Not much of the people also understands about it, and not much of people also bothered about it. And China took just easily. But because we have only 6 million Tibetans. And so far, even though we try to defend our own countries, we cannot match. We were not able to match the Chinese forces. But they were in millions. But we took a fight for over 9 years, like defending the country. And therefore, what happened is now the liberation, which they so-called liberation they've been promoting now. Now the question is, from whom we were liberated, right? So China gives lots of excuses. Now they are saying that they are at this moment every year they are celebrating this self-emancipation. Is one thing, right? They are saying that they are foreign people, right? But alien people who are being there dominant. So they want to liberate from the foreign invaders, foreigners. But hardly there are few foreigners in the fingertips. Not many foreigners are there. Not many people understand about Tibet. Only few bunch of foreigners are there, and these foreigners are not that right. They are not the aggressors. So somehow China is they have their expansionist ideas right from the beginning, and they gave this liberation as an excuse for their aggressions. Right, and even now they are saying that Tibet is an inalienable part of China. Tibet is a part of China's not just from 7th century, not just from 13th century, which they have proclaimed earlier. Now, under Xi Jinping, they said that Tibet is part of China since time immemorial or antiquities. So, even for them also, for the sake of their own convenience, they are rewriting the history.
Mm-hmm.
But for their own political objective, at this point, they are playing a convenient kind of narrative by saying that yes, Tibet was part of China since antiquity. So where to point the fingers? Now the question lies, are Chinese truthful to themselves? Are the Chinese leaders, right, not just to the world, are they being truthful to themselves? They are not. In fact. Right. They know that the history is bitter. Right. History tells something different from their own narratives. So in 1990s, around 1990s, in their first paper, they on Tibet, when they launched their first paper on Tibet, they claimed that Tibet was part of China since 7th century.
Hmm.
Right. And there was a rebuttal from our side, which says that no, Tibet was not part of China from 7th century, and it burned their fingers. Right. Then what they did is they go down to 13th century. They said that no, Kublai Khan during the Yuan dynasty, Tibet was part of China. Now, who was Kublai Khan? Kublai Khan was a Mongolian who invaded China, right, and ruled over China. Again, that narrative didn't work out well. And again, they burned their fingers. So now under Xi Jinping, he was talking about rejuvenation of China. He was talking about China dream. He tried to have this kind of a middle kingdom kind of a thing. But so now they are saying that no, if they realize that if they put their finger on the recorded history of Tibet, right, it always burn their fingers. So what they intend to do is they want to go to the unrecorded history, go beyond unrecorded history by claiming that Tibet was part of China since antiquity. Now, even China do not know when that antiquity starts. Right. So therefore, I think China is making a big mistake, and this is the last resort for China to claim Tibet. And that is an obvious for them to fail because it is not based on truth.
Hmm.
This is one thing. Now, 17 means inside Tibet. Okay, they call themselves as liberators. They call themselves being the one to liberate Tibet from serfdom, this thing, that thing, whatever they call it. Now, are they justifying themselves by doing what exactly they are doing right now for over 60 years? No. But they came, attacked, killed, tortured, destroyed everything inside Tibet. Right? So if they go to Tibet, killed millions of people, destroyed all the Tibetan monasteries and learning centers, how can they call themselves as liberators? They are not the liberators, but the destructors. They are the destroyer of the Tibetan culture, Tibetan identity. Right? And the Tibetans, what they've been telling the world, but they are not true to themselves. Forget about to the Tibetans, they are not true to themselves.
Mm.
Whatever they are doing is only for their own interest of unity and stability. Their only fear is about stability. Their only fear is about unity,
Mm.
not understanding the reality of what is really happening with the Tibetan. And so far, for more than 60, 70 years, they've been there with the Tibetans. Till date, they don't even have make an effort to understand what Tibetans really need.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the problem with China. Right. China always with this Middle Kingdom mindset, right, of the superiority of Han. It is not just the Tibetans who are suffering. All other people in China, including the Chinese people themselves, are suffering under the regime, under the Communist Party. So therefore, it is a difficult moment for the Tibetans. The, the situation inside Tibet is critical. Right, the Tibetans are still suffering. Right, under the Iron Curtain. Tibetan is just like a giant prison. Right, the Orwellian prison, where we don't know exactly what is happening. But there are many mechanisms built to surveil Tibet, right? And also to filter the informations, curb the informations, not by letting not just people going out, obstructing people to move out, but also obstructing the information to come out. But therefore, as of now, Tibet uh, is like a hell. Tibet is under the cultural genocide. Tibetans have no freedom to exercise their own in exercising, in preserving, promoting their own identity, culture, language, Buddhism. But so therefore, it's a difficult phase which we have been going through. But somehow, all through this time of 60 years, right, there is a hope among the Tibetans, not just in this side of the world, but also in the other side of the world, that is beyond Himalaya, in Tibet. The majority of Tibetans are living with the hope
Mm.
that one day the freedom will be restored. One day the sun will shine back in Tibet. And the Chinese leaders need to understand that the truth will prevail. Truth has to prevail, and truth will prevail, no matter what kind of the coercive measures they've been doing, but what kind of assimilative policies they've been implementing, what kind of all these torturous but things which they have been implementing. But the fact of the matter is, truth will prevail, and our struggle is based on truth.
Hmm. So you've brought about, it's indescribable, if I may say that. In today's day and age, when stuff like this happens, it's indescribable. I want to actually support your theory about the history, because there's a book written by Sun Yat-sen in 1922, which is called The International Development of China, where he's spoken about the colonization of Tibet, right? And if Tibet was a part of China, why would you want to colonize it?
That's
So and the Chinese have literally followed what that book has said about their development and railway lines and this and that. That's a very interesting book. He's written in 1922. So it's absolutely correct. What you're saying is absolutely correct. My question today is about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Of course, God give him a very long and healthy life, but we know the inevitable, sadly, is going to come. And the Chinese are trying to change the narrative of, it's sad, but a narrative of an entire religion, of an entire belief system, of something that has been going on for centuries. The Chinese plan to literally change that. How do you, as a community, look at that? How do people, if you have any insights within Tibet, look at that when the Chinese are trying to discredit the Dalai Lama and bring in their own twisted version of whatever they want to? How is that perceived?
see, Adi, when His Holiness met Mao Zedong in 1954 in Beijing, that time Peking, Mao whispers into the ears of His Holiness that religion is opium, religion is poison, poison. Right from that moment till date, but China do not have any kind of a instinct or any kind of a goodwill on the Buddhism. Not just Buddhism, on religion, any religion. But in China, but look at the Christians, look at the Muslims, look at the Buddhists. But because communist regime do not believe in religion, one thing. But they consider right from the beginning they considered religion as poison. Right. So now how this affection came, how this goodwill or they projected goodwill came then is for political reasons, for their own political reason, for the regime to sustain. But they have to convert this religion thing into, but manufacture that one into political.
Hmm.
So therefore, look, His Holiness, see, all through the time they've been criticizing His Holiness. Right? They've been very, they've been, I think, they are hypocrites in a way. Right? If you don't like the person, you don't like them. But they said that you don't like the person, but you are talking about his incarnation. Please follow me. You don't like him, but you like his palace so much that it became a backdrop. Like Kodala Palace. See, China is very strange in a way that
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
China, they themselves call as the liberator. They themselves call as making Tibet infrastructural developed and all these things. But whatever they have been doing, they can only project Kodala as a backdrop of their development, of their presence. But Kodala was not built by the Chinese. But in every in every backdrops of their projects, videos, propagandas, they will show Kodala Palace. But Kodala Palace was not being manufactured by the Chinese. Kodala Palace is not being built by the Chinese. But Kodala Palace is the palace of His Holiness. But since from the fifth Dalai Lama's time. It was built by the fifth Dalai Lama. Right. So therefore now you don't like the religion, you don't like the person, but you were so much engaged in right those things simply for what? For political reason. So therefore China is no goodwill on religion. But somehow due to the political needs, they felt need for using this religion for the political as a political tool. So therefore they will not succeed. Because they have first thing they don't have a faith. Second thing they don't have belief in the traditional belief system, right? In the Tibetan Buddhist. In fact, if they really understand and value the Tibetan Buddhism, why would China call Tibetan Buddhism as Chinese characteristics? Right? The Tibetan Buddhism is not of Chinese characteristics. They know that. We've been proudly saying that the Tibetan Buddhism is a Nalanda tradition. But this is the truth. In 7th, 8th centuries, right, when the 36th king of Tibet right, have a session between the Indian masters and the Chinese masters, he adopted the Indian master by letting the Chinese masters go back to China, by introducing the Indian tradition. Then why would China insist upon saying that the Tibetan Buddhism is of Chinese characteristics? Right. They are simply trying to earn the legitimacy, which they don't own actually.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, whatever they've been doing, they are not going to succeed. Right. Because the religion is a matter of faith. And they don't believe in the faith. Then how can they succeed? Right. They are using just for political reasons. So therefore, I think it's too to fail. And obviously, as of now, His Holiness is very healthy. But every now and then, His Holiness meets with hundreds of people. We wish His Holiness to stay long, not just to serve the Tibetan, but to serve the larger humanity.
Absolutely.
Right. Therefore, it's not a question about His Holiness reincarnation. There is no doubt about His Holiness reincarnation. His Holiness has already told many times that if the Tibetan issue is unresolved, he will want in a free world, not in China, but even not in China occupied Tibet. But therefore, I think there is no question about China having the legitimacy. Right. China is forcing about it, but they don't have it, and they don't own it, and they don't have any goodwill. Right. So therefore, China is, I think, do not understands. That's the problem. As I said before, China do not understand the Tibetan belief system. China not just the belief system. China not even do not understand the Tibetan people. Even after brutally ruling Tibet for the last 67 years.
75 years, yeah.
Yeah, they don't. Now they don't understand. They're just simply trying to serve their own interest. Right. But is it really serving their interest? Again,
Is
it's a
it?
good question.
Is
It's a
it?
good question.
Mhm.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Right. If they really want to serve their own interests, they need to look into the aspirations of the people. But what people really need, they need to look into. But if they do not look into people's aspirations and just simply trying to fulfill their own self-interest, it is not sustainable. It is not going to work. Therefore, I think Chinese leaders need to be wise enough to understand what is good for China for long term. Right?
Speaking very lightly, sir, you're asking the Chinese to be wise. That's a contradiction in terms right there. I'm sorry,
Yes,
that's
China.
just a that's very light-hearted humor. I don't mean much about it, but sir, you've brought about a very interesting point that the assimilation of the people in Tibet has not been able to be fully complete. Now that brings me to two questions. I'll ask one now and the second one after that. Is the factor that why is China still worried about Tibet? Is that the reason that he's not been able to assimilate the entire population? I'm sure subversion is such a strong tactic, sir. Even the strongest of minds give up subversion. So I'm sure there will be some people, and that's how life is. You know, after 70 years, that's how life is. But what you've said tells me that the Chinese have not been able to assimilate the population at all. And there is that spirit which is obviously still there. Is that what worries the Chinese, sir? Because when I look at the news, they talk about Tibet, 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 Tibet. And the next thing to Tibet was is security, 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 security. Why is that? Is there still a worry that Tibet might just rise up against them someday?
There is a saying in Tibetan that China loses because of their fear. But it's not just about Tibet. Whatever China do, the first thing in their mind is fear. Fear because of the mistrust. They don't trust.
Hmm.
So one thing is that yes, they've been doing all these severe measures, right? They've been doing all these hardline, right, dictatorial authority policies inside Tibet, but they couldn't win the heart of the people. They were not able to win the heart of the people, right? So if they can't win the heart of the people, and if they couldn't win the heart of the people, they cannot win, right? They are just a bloody oppressor.
Hmm.
Right. So therefore, I think the fact of the matter is, I think the Chinese leader has to be benign. Right. They cannot all the time push for hard line. Right. They cannot. Right. So therefore, the benign in the sense that it should be right, truly benign, not to be as projected as benign. Right. So therefore, over the years, 70 years, we see what kind of things which China has done. But all about suffering, pain, torture, killing, destructions. What more China has done? Right.
Hmm.
And you said that yes, they are proud of this development inside Tibet. For what? For whom? We never asked for developments. The Tibetans have never asked for the developments. They impose upon it for their own interest.
For their
Right.
own benefits.
But for their own benefits. Right. So therefore, Chinese leaders, Chinese people need to understand, right, the real aspirations of the Tibetan people, what the Tibetan really need, right, not the want. Want is unlimited, right? It's a big thing. But at least go down and then ask the Tibetan people what they really need. The need is approach should be there.
Absolutely.
As, as of now, they don't.
Hmm.
As of now, they don't look into all these things. So therefore, I think China is going to face a lot of challenges. Right? And the second thing is that okay, they have criticized his holiness, they have put different names on him, right? But his holiness is not like any other leaders of this world, right? The leaders comes and goes, the traditional leaders comes and goes. Like you have seen Aadi last time during the 20th National Congress, right? Hu Jintao, who used to be the Supremo, was kicked out.
Yeah, dragged out, absolutely.
Were kicked out. It set a precedent for Xi Jinping also, that later in his day also, he will be kicked out, just like Hu Jintao. And these are the contemporary leaders of the world who don't have any ethics, who don't have any morals down. Right. But look at His Holiness. But since we live in a modern world, right, the leaders comes and goes. But for the Tibetan, His Holiness is different. That's why China, no matter what they tried, they were not able to de-associate, but they are not able to distract the bond between His Holiness and the Tibetans. That bond has been there, firmly connected for centuries, not just in this lifetime, but through all the existence of the Tibetan. Right. His Holiness is connected to Tibetans. But it is not just 100 years of communist regime or communist party they being jubilant of. They being jubilant of this 100 years which is coming, which they have gone through. But we are talking about centuries. We are talking about eons. How can they be able to destroy and disconnect the two bonds which are in solid forms? But so look, in exile, we are young Tibetans who have never seen Tibet, but are committed for the cause. Right? And way beyond Himalaya, in Tibet, the young Tibetans who are under the Chinese regime, but who have never seen His Holiness in their life, but could sacrifice their life for the return of His Holiness.
Mm-hmm.
This is my point, right? Which is unbreakable. So China, instead of putting all the efforts in disconnecting this bond, right, they should do more benign things by looking into the aspirations of the Tibetan people and be benevolent. But unfortunately, all through the existence, they were never benevolent, unfortunately. But they can learn from His Holiness how they can be a benevolent leader. Right. So, as a matter of fact, now if you look at the history, Chinese history, Chinese are not peaceful. Chinese dynasties are not peaceful. They are varying states. That's why the Chinese leaders they only look into Sun Tzu's art of war, not the peace. All through the dynasties, right? Sun Tzu's art of war is the Bible for them
Yeah.
to look into, right? As a statecraft, how to win the other, but through war, right? Therefore, I think China in this 21st century, right, their geopolitical landscape has to change, their mindset has to change, and then convert their wearing state mindset, right, and adopt a benign, more compassionate form if they really want to aspire to be the world leader.
The problem with China is sense doesn't mean anything to them, and that's something I've learned in my short little time of studying China. So you've told us what goes on within the hearts of people, uh, and you can put a stick on their head, tell them not to put the photograph of the Dalai Lama on their walls, tell them not to go to their temples. You can do all that. You can't extinguish what goes on inside someone's heart from generation to generation, and that's important. So, are people getting out of Tibet, sir? Because a lot of people would want to, for personal reasons, for family, for their children. Is there opportunities for people to leave that area? or is it just whatever whoever left now they're stuck?
So it's very difficult now. So in 1980s, when Deng Xiaoping's time, there were some liberal policies, which was short-term liberal policies happened, and then many people escaped from Tibet also in those days, right? And then till 2008, we estimate around an average of around 3,000 a year comes to India, right? Escape from Tibet. But in 2008, there was a major uprising inside Tibet,
Hmm.
right? And that gives a kind of a distractions to China's image, because when if many people comes out, when many people understands the reality of Tibet, and it's a shame for China, right, in the world. So they have sealed the borders, they obstructed the movements of the Tibetans, and hardly now in a year, 5, 10, 7, goes down, right? Again, this is the hard reality, because China do not want people to understand the reality of what is happening in Tibet. That's why I said Tibet has become like a giant prison where no information can flow out of it.
Hmm.
Right? Somehow many people used to talk about fake news, but no, right? And what is happening inside Uyghur, right? All these tortures, right? All these labor camps. But in fact, I would say that it was already experimented in Tibet. The Chen Zhenguo, who was the party secretary, was later transferred to Xinjiang. And he had already experimented that in Tibet and then adopted in Xinjiang. Right. So therefore, since the information is not coming out, right, that doesn't mean that nothing is happening over there. There are many things happening over there. But the unfortunate thing is that Tibet has become a large prison where the surveillance mechanisms built, right? Where informations are filtered, where information is obstructed, right? Therefore, it's difficult. Right? But somehow, right, there are still connections. We still communicate with Tibetans through different means. But we understand, because as being the voice of those voiceless Tibetan, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to understand exactly what is happening inside Tibet. And what is Tibet right now is of lonely situations, difficult situations. So, since 2009, we have a recorded of 157 self-immolations which has taken place in Tibet. But not for his own interest, but for larger interests. People self-immolated for Tibet's freedom. Right. So this is the extreme case of non-violence, not by hurting anybody except yourself, by highlighting the Tibetan issue, with the thinking that his own sacrifice will be spread out to the world, that the world, people of the world will understand the reality of what's happening in such way. It's a very sad thing. It's very sad. Right? But somehow, Adi, what I want to inform you is Tibet issue, if you support Tibet issue, if you are supporting anybody who is supporting Tibetans, it is not just supporting Tibetan people. You are supporting justice. You are supporting truth. You are supporting non-violence. Right. Within our own eyes of staying exiled or under the oppression of China, we have seen new countries emerging, new nations coming out. The Soviet collapse, within our own eyes, we have seen new countries emerge. After that, also we have seen many countries, new countries emerged. Why not the freedom be restored in Tibet? Why not? But, so therefore, I think for the world, it is not just for the sake of the Tibetans that the world has to support Tibet, but for the world itself, for the sake of the world, the world need to support Tibet. And especially, I think India, right, because we are connected, we were neighbors, we are Guru and Chela, right? We got this Buddhism from India. We always used to say that we are the faithful Chelas, right? So when Chela is suffering, Guru has to take responsibility, right, to help Chelas. One thing, this is a moral thing, moral duty. Guru has a moral duty to help the Chela who needs help. This is one thing. Second thing is strategically, right, India has a huge stake. This is India's own interest. The borders are disputed. Nowhere in the Tibetan history, India-Tibet history, the borders were disputed. Right. The Tibetans can come to Bodh Gaya without a visa, right? Pilgrimage.
It
Indians
was
can
all
go.
open, sir.
No,
Yeah.
it's all right. Indians go to Kailash, Mansarovar Yatra, they can come down, right? There is a movement without restrictions. Now the borders are all sealed, right? And not just the borders are sealed, there are disputes all through them. There are aggressions, there are transaggressions, there are incursions, there are lots of disturbance incidents happening on the borders. One thing. Second thing is ecology. Tibet has a pristine ecology for over centuries, but we have a recorded of around more than 40,000 glaciers, which is supposed to be called as third pole, right? And it is the origin of the six largest rivers in Asia, right? Which is a source of livelihoods of many Asian people, millions of Asians, right? Particularly with India. Now, my worry is, okay, my understanding is, where is Saraswati River? I used to tell my Indian friends, where is Saraswati River? But the holy river, Saraswati River is a holy river. Where is it right now? Nowhere to point fingers. Right. I could imagine that if the Tibetan glaciers melt in the future, the same question will be asked: where is Ganga? Where is Brahmaputra? Where is Satluj? Where is Indus? Because they all flows from Himalaya. They all flows from Tibet. If the Tibetan glaciers melt, obviously it will happen. Right. So I think India has its own stake in supporting Tibet, not for the sake of the Tibetans, but for the sake of India's own interest. Right. The Indian public need to not just being sympathetic to Tibetans, but all through the times we admire, we being grateful to Indians for being sympathetic to the Tibetans. Everywhere, wherever you go, people are talking about Tibetan freedom, justice, equality. They're being very supportive, very sympathetic. But it should be more than sympathy because your stake is also there. India's interest is also there. India should consider its own interest to help support Tibetan movement. Right? Because there are lots of destructions of ecology going on in Tibet.
Mm.
This is the hard reality because of infrastructural developments, because of the dams, they are so that Tibet's pristine ecology is being destroyed. That's why the Tibetan inside Tibet, the temperatures are rising above any other cities in the world. Temperatures are rising in Tibet. Right. So it is a matter of
That's
concern. It is a matter of concern to be discussed, to be talked, to be engaged, to be worked. Right. So of course,
there's no question, sir, because I mean, leave alone the interest. It's a matter of a people that are, if I may, subjugated, and that's the worst thing about the whole thing. Here is certain countries have occupied other countries, and they say, "Ah, we've occupied it." Fair enough. But here there is this web of lies that the Chinese come up. No, 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 we had it from the 7th century. No, 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 13th century. Then some guy will write a book and create maps and this and that and put it out there. With the Qing dynasty in third century, we had. What are you talking about? And it lacks the sense of reality, and that's the whole sad part of. In today's day and age, when there's such a lack of sense of reality, it's really sad, sir. So I must say, I am so grateful. Please, can you say something?
I think China has been adopting this proper right. Is that if you tell lies 1,000 times, it becomes true. So therefore, China using this tactic in a way that they want to propagate that in a way that it falls under China. But this is not true. Right? It has to prevail. The truth has to prevail. Right? The truth need to be informed. The truth need to be instilled upon the minds of the people. Right? So that the justice will prevail. Not just for the sake of the Tibetans, but for the sake of the larger humanity.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so therefore, I think we Tibetans for the last 60 years remain hopeful, right? And even now we are hopeful, and even in the future, Tibetans will remain hopeful because hope is the matter where the movement will go, right? Right? Along with the truth. Therefore, I think the Chinese people, we can't blame them.
Hmm.
Right? They have been going through all these propagandas all through their life. But the Chinese leaders, they need to educate themselves. They need to be wise enough to understand what is good for China at the end. If they are really if they are really thinking about China's well-being in the future, they need to be humane. Right? They need to be humane. They cannot remain as hardcore isolationist, hardcore oppressor. They cannot. They will not be able to win the heart of the people. Right. Therefore, I think China needs to learn lots of lessons. But the good thing is that we are not being right, trashed. Well, our voices are more than ever visible and proper. They cannot hear our voice. Even after 60 years, we are thriving. We are going to tell that there is a long-standing Sino-Tibetan conflict, and the conflict has to be resolved for the sake of the Tibetan people and for the sake of Chinese people and also for the sake of the larger humanity.
On that note, so I'm so grateful that you've actually taken out time to tell the story. When you hear things like this, there's not much one can actually say because it's quite overwhelming, and one can just begin to understand the plight of the people, considering that. And I'm just saying, just begin because we also have the Chinese standing on our borders and trying to put pressure on us. So one can just in a tiny little space begin to understand what goes through people's minds when you're occupied, and of course with Indian history being occupied, and with a colonial power being in force in India for 250, 200 plus years, one can fathom what goes through people's minds and what kind of subversion happens. Um, some would argue that India has taken the past 75 years and we are still not over that colonial hangover. So I can only imagine what you're trying to say, and I'm grateful that you've taken out the time, sir. And may I request, let this not be the only time. Let's stay in touch because I'd love to put the story out more often. I'd love the factor that more audience should be able to interact and kind of learn, if nothing else, about the true designs of China.
Adi, I'll be more than happy to engage with you in the future. Right? If there's any interesting topics which you want to discuss about, right? In fact, what we are talking about is Tibetan have been victimized for over 60 years. Right? Now, at this point of time, they were not able to crush us. That means that we have a strength,
Mhm.
right? So we are not speaking of the victim's narrative now, right? We cannot all the time say that we are down, we are polluted, we are destroyed, we are. Yes, we have, China has tortured us, but there are things which is larger than that, right? That we can contribute, right, to the world. Therefore, I think there are many things which we can discuss about. And I've been thankful to you for giving this opportunity. And we Tibetans are always being grateful to Indian government and Indian public both, but right from the time of GB's, right, Jipravasti, right.
Thank you, sir.
And even now we can see the whole lot of sentiments among the Indian public, right, showing support and solidarity for Tibet. We've been grateful for that. But somehow it is not just for the Tibetan people that they have to show support, that they have to show support for their own cause, their own interest, because India is also at stake. Right? So therefore, I think with the movements coming forward and the world is going into a different shift, right? People need to be educated. People need to be aware and understand what it is going. And especially Indians need to understand and have a knowledge of Tibet, Tibetan culture, Tibetan identity, because among these 1.4 billion Indians, almost 1.4 billion Indians, but the capacity of India on Tibet is lacking. Indians need to build up their authorities on the Tibetan studies. Then only India will be able to help Tibet. Right? So consolidating the efforts in understanding Tibet is very important for India's own interest. So hopefully, uh, young Indians who are in the college can become uh, authority on Tibetan studies in the future, learn, right, to do PhDs of Tibetan studies. But now I can see the numbers are picking up. It's a good sign that more and more young Indians are joining PhDs in Tibetan studies. That's a good thing. But hopefully, more will join so that India understands Tibet.
Thank you so much, sir. I
Thank
hope
you.
what you say comes true, and see you next time, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Adi. Pleasure meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Safer.